Hey everybody, welcome into the Alabama Recruiting Show. I'm Hannah Chalker alongside our Crimson Tide recruiting reporter, Chris Kirshner. Thanks everybody for joining us. It's been a while since we've been back on the Alabama SEC Country page talking recruiting. Chris, I think it's before the holidays. How you been?
Good. How about you?
Doing good, doing good. I'm glad that we're able to get back in talking about this stuff. Give us some quick updates on what you've been able to see and do the past month since we've been on air.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Alabama was in the national championship game. Alabama came back down 13 at halftime, put in Tua Tagovailoa. The freshman leads Alabama to another national championship game. So, I mean, obviously, it's an exciting time right now for Alabama with recruiting, with the team. The championship parade was this past weekend. Alabama has one of the nation's top 10 recruiting classes in the country. So, I mean, everything right now is all good with the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, a lot of momentum. The 17th national title for the University of Alabama. Nick Saban's 5th national championship with the Crimson Tide. Of course, we didn't have the luxury of going to the parade, but of course watched it. We actually covered it here on the Alabama SEC Country page, me and Mike Johnson. And a ton of top recruits were in town. How impressed were they with what we're seeing here on the screen?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the championship parade, Alabama is going to do its best to have the top targets in town, and that's what they did. The majority of the team's top targets were in Tuscaloosa this past weekend. A couple five-star cornerbacks who we'll get to soon, Tyson Campbell, Patrick Surtain, five-star offensive tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere, major commitments in Quay Walker, Bobby Brown. So yeah, I mean, it's no coincidence that Alabama had the majority of its top targets back in town for this event, just because you want these recruits to see just the environment that Tuscaloosa was this past weekend. I saw some reports that over 40,000 fans were estimated in attendance, which is a ton. Some programs don't even get that for their games on Saturdays. And just to think, over 40,000 people were there just to see a parade. So the environment there is definitely impressive for recruits. And from all I've heard from this past weekend talking to people is that every recruit had a very, very good time, and Alabama has gained significant momentum with a lot of its top targets.
How could you not have a good time when you have confetti falling down on your head? Hey, you were at the national championship at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta against Georgia. You know, what was the chatter coming out of the recruiting world after the big win?
Yeah, I mean, definitely impressive. Anytime, and it's clear that Alabama probably wouldn't have won that national championship if it didn't put in those true freshmen. Outside of Tua, you have Najee Harris, who had a big fourth quarter. Alex Leatherwood replaces Jonah Williams at left tackle. He does a fantastic job. Jerry Jeudy has a big catch in the fourth quarter. Devontae Smith obviously catches the game-winning touchdown. Those impressive performances by the freshmen. I forgot to mention Henry Ruggs had a big touchdown in the game too. So if Alabama doesn't have those true freshmen in the game, I don't think they win that game, and I think Alabama honestly gets blown out by Georgia. And we're here talking about how Alabama can regain momentum with recruits after a devastating loss, and instead, Alabama is now celebrating another national championship. So anytime you can have true freshmen come in and impact a national championship game, recruits are going to take notice, and that's what they've had.
Yeah, and you mentioned Tua. We've got a really great show coming up for you today, including a 3-star quarterback that's become a top prospect for Alabama. We're going to fill you in on that. Also, still some roster spots to be filled for Coach Saban. We're going to talk about the top guys to fill those roles, and Quay Walker, 4-star linebacker, 5-star, according to 24/7 Sports. He was one of the guys that was in town for his official visit. Official visit or unofficial visit?
Official visit.
Okay,
Right.
His official visit. And there's like 3 or 4 schools that are trying to pull him away, so we'll get your updates on Quay Walker. Of course, we want to take your viewer engagement. I see a lot of people are in here. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Pamela Sewell says, we are world champions. Watch out, UCF, world champions. Pamela, that's saying a lot. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, UCF thinks they're national championships. I saw actually they put up a banner in their practice, in their indoor facility, that they're national champions. So I don't know if we can consider Alabama national champions. I think UCF maybe have the crown right now.
I think so too. Well, also having the crown, let's get into our show, is 2 5-star cornerbacks. Okay, the 2 best cornerbacks, well, potentially the 2 best cornerbacks, come from the same high school, Heritage High School, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Of course, that's Tyson Campbell, Patrick Surtain Jr. They were in town taking visits to Alabama. They are both not committed. What did you hear from them after the weekend?
Yeah, from talking to multiple sources, Alabama feels like Patrick Surtain and Tyson Campbell both favor Alabama at this time. But from talking to one source, he said that, it's not likely that both cornerbacks end up at the same school. And right now it seems like Patrick Surtain is the more likely candidate at this time to end up at Alabama. For the longest time, it seems like LSU was the favorite to land Surtain. His family has very strong ties to Louisiana and specifically Baton Rouge. LSU has been his leader for over a year now, but over the past few months, Alabama has chipped away at LSU's lead for Surtain. Surtain actually told SEC Country earlier this month that he feels like the opportunity to play early in Tuscaloosa is definitely very obtainable. Alabama is losing 6 guys in the secondary. Alabama didn't sign any true cornerbacks in the 2017 class. They signed Kyrique McDonald last year, but Kyrique will likely play star when he gets the opportunity to see the field. So the opportunity to see the field early at Alabama is definitely something that Surtain is taking into consideration right now. And after this visit to Alabama, it seems like Alabama has seized the momentum in Surtain's recruitment. But there's still a few weeks to go until National Signing Day, February 7th. Recruiting changes by the day, but as of right now, I expect Patrick Surtain, the nation's #1 cornerback, to choose Alabama on National Signing Day. And what a win that would be for Alabama, because like we've said countless times on the show, countless times on SECCountry.com, getting quality cornerbacks is monumental for Alabama in this class because, as I just said, no cornerbacks last year, losing 6 guys in the secondary, losing guys like Micah Fitzpatrick, Ronnie Harrison, Anthony Averett, Levi Wallace, losing guys like that who did a great job for Alabama, and then you can replace those guys with a guy like Surtain. That's gigantic, and there's really no other way to put it.
Well, while their Surtains were in Tuscaloosa this weekend, Patrick Surtain Jr.'s dad actually interviewed with Coach Saban for a position there. He's the head coach at Heritage High School, so he does have coaching experience. But what does that say to you?
Yeah, I mean, I know some fans from opposing schools are going to look at that and say, oh, Nick Saban and Alabama are just trying to hire Patrick Surtain Sr. to get his son. That's not really the case. He has lots of experience at American Heritage High School. American Heritage is definitely one of the top high school football programs in the country, and Surtain Sr., obviously, long career in the NFL, all-pro, Pro Bowler type career for Patrick Surtain Sr. So Alabama decides to interview him for its defensive backs coach job, left open by Derek Ansley, who left for the Oakland Raiders. Surtain Sr. was ultimately passed up for Carl Scott. And there's really no ill will from Surtain Sr. on being passed up on the opportunity. He hasn't been a college coach before. It would have been his first opportunity at the collegiate level. So there's really, I know some people are going to be like, well, Nick Saban passed him up, so I don't know if he's going to allow his son to consider the school, but that's really not the case at all. The entire Surtain family, very big fans of Alabama, very big fans of Nick Saban himself. And as I said, Alabama's been chipping away for months now. Nick Saban himself is very involved in this recruitment. And I know some fans are going to be like, well, now that Derek Ansley left and Alabama has a new defensive backs coach who's only been here for a week, how's that going to affect Alabama's recruitment of these top defensive backs that they're still after. And I would say that Nick Saban himself is very involved in coaching the secondary. Saban was a former defensive back at Kent State. Even with Derek Ansley in Tuscaloosa, Nick Saban was very, very involved in coaching the secondary. So with that, with the opportunity to play early, with the opportunity to win a championship, every Nick Saban class at Alabama has won a national championship. So when you combine those two things, I would say Alabama's odds at landing a guy like Patrick Surtain, five-star cornerback, nation's #1 cornerback, top 10 overall player in the 2018 class, I would say those odds are pretty good, even despite the fact that his father was passed up for an opportunity. And that's not to say that Surtain Sr. is not going to get an opportunity down the road with Alabama, because Alabama still can sign a 10th assistant coach, which is a new rule implemented by the NCAA this year. So it's possible he gets that spot. I know he's still being considered for that opening. So who knows? Maybe in the next few weeks, Alabama decides to hire him, and Alabama gets Patrick Surtain as well.
Looking over in the comments section, we're having a lot of people asking some questions about kickers. We're going to hold off on that for now. We've also have a good question from Jay Belcher. Any notable D-line commits? You actually caught up with Bobby Brown. You have an interview with him. That's coming up too. So I see your questions on kickers, guys. There's like 10 of them. It's like the hot topic in the comment section. I'm going to get Chris's thoughts on that in just a minute. But let's talk about something else that people want to know too. Justin Ross, the state of Alabama's #1 prospect, #7 wide receiver rank, #45 national rank. How did things go with him this weekend?
Yeah, very well. I think Alabama hit a home run with Justin Ross. Ross has been a top target for Alabama for over a year now. Former teammates and very good friends with freshman linebacker Markale Benton. He redshirted this past year, so he'll be a redshirt freshman next season. But I would say that Alabama's odds of landing Justin Ross have definitely improved since the last week. Going into this visit, Alabama definitely felt confident with where it stood with Justin Ross, the state of Alabama's #1 prospect. But from my interviews with Justin Ross over the past few months, I just got the indication that he was favoring Clemson. Ross is a very quiet kid, kind of hard to read, but whenever Ross would talk to me in person, whenever I mentioned Clemson, whenever I asked questions about Clemson, he had a giant smile on his face. He would say that that first visit he ever took to Clemson was the best visit he's ever taken as far as recruiting goes. So, but now after this past weekend, in town for the national championship game, he got to pose for pictures with the new trophy. Got to hold the crystal ball. I think Alabama's odds of landing Justin Ross have definitely improved, and he's another guy, when he makes his decision on National Signing Day, I expect Alabama to land his commitment. And it also doesn't hurt the fact that Ross was hosted by freshman quarterback Tua Tagovailoa just a few weeks after Tagovailoa leads Alabama back from a comeback win against Georgia in the national championship game, throws a last-second touchdown pass in the national championship game to another freshman wide receiver. So it definitely doesn't hurt Alabama's chances with Ross, with the fact that Tagovailoa was his host. And the fact that, from what I heard from this past weekend, is that out of all the visits that Ross has taken to Tuscaloosa, and there are plenty, countless visits to Tuscaloosa, this past weekend's trip, sources told me that it was the most engaged that they've seen Ross on campus, and that's definitely saying something from the amount of trips he's taken.
So you think the 4-star wide receiver goes with Alabama over Clemson come National Signing Day?
I do think that right now. He's planning on taking an official visit to Auburn this upcoming weekend. It's down to Alabama, Auburn, and Clemson right now. But I do think it's a two-team race with Alabama and Clemson. He took his official visit to Clemson, I believe, back in November. So he's not planning on, he can't take another official visit to Clemson. He could decide to take an unofficial visit to Clemson in these next few weeks, but right now nothing is planned as of yet. The only thing that Justin Ross has planned is that official visit to Auburn this upcoming weekend.
All right, moving right along to somebody that's been pretty shaky with his commitment. That's 4-star Quay Walker, 5-star according to 247sports.com. They bumped him up earlier this week. This is a guy who's talking to Tennessee and Jeremy Pruitt. He's talking to Kirby Smart and UBGA. This is a player that a lot of teams around the SEC and the country want. Huge linebacker commit. Obviously, Alabama needs that. He is committed to Alabama, though. Why is he so shaky, and how did things go this weekend with Quay?
Yeah, I mean, to answer your first question, I think Quay is shaky because of the fact that Jeremy Pruitt, who he really wanted to be coached by, is gone. Obviously, you guys know by now he's the new head coach at Tennessee. And then combine that with his primary recruiter, Derek Ansley, who we just talked about. He left for the Oakland Raiders secondary job. So the two coaches that he was closest with are now gone. So he has to build new relationships with guys that he hasn't really talked to. I mean, yes, he has a relationship with Nick Saban himself, but his position coach, which is unclear at this point, could be Tosh Lupoy, but right now he doesn't have those relationships that he had with Jeremy Pruitt and Derek Ansley. Both those guys are gone now. He actually told me yesterday that heading into his official visit to Tuscaloosa this past weekend, he told Tennessee linebacker commit, who he's very close with, J.J. Peterson, while they were in Tuscaloosa, that at first, the vibe he got, it just didn't feel right. But then as the weekend went on, he started talking to the new staff, the new coaches, I should say. He definitely got more comfortable with where he stood with his commitment to Alabama. Now, that's not to say that it's a definite that Quay Walker is going to end up sticking with the Crimson Tide. That's just not the case right now. He's still planning on taking official visits to Auburn and Georgia before National Signing Day rolls around. So those schools are going to have an opportunity to flip Walker from his commitment. But it's interesting to note that he has definitely been shaky with his commitment, but he hasn't gone ahead and actually decommitted from the Crimson Tide. So that's saying something. I mean, obviously something is keeping him committed to Alabama. And he told me that earlier this month when I was in Orlando for the Under Armour game, that he loves Alabama. I mean, what's not to love about Alabama? As I said, every Nick Saban recruiting class has won a national championship. They've turned out so many NFL prospects at linebacker. He actually talked to former linebacker Reggie Ragland this past weekend, and Ragland actually told Walker, if the NFL is where you want to be, there's really not a better school in the country than Alabama. I mean, Ragland gave all the credit to Nick Saban for developing him into a first-round NFL pick. And Ragland has had a successful career in the NFL so far. So I mean, combine that with the fact that Nick Saban himself spent lots of one-on-one time with Walker this past weekend. Saban actually was driving Walker around in his luxury car. He got the preferential treatment. So
wait, Saban was driving? He has a driver.
Yeah,
so Saban actually drove.
Saban was driving,
Wow.
and Quay Walker was in the front seat. So I mean, stuff like that, it may not matter to some fans, but recruits definitely love that sort of stuff. So yeah, I do think Alabama definitely did its best job with Quay Walker this weekend. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in these next few weeks. But he is still committed. He had a very good time in Tuscaloosa. Got to talk to the new staff. So we'll see what happens. It's too close to call, in my opinion.
You mentioned Jeremy Pruitt, and that's why Quay Walker is so shaky on his commitment. Jimmy Barnhill in the comment section says, what is the word on the DC?
Yeah, there's really no update right now. Obviously, Alabama just finished a national championship parade. It seems like, in my opinion, that Pete Golding, who was hired from UTSA, and Tosh Lupoy will end up being co-defensive coordinators, but nothing official from Alabama at this point.
Yeah, Jay Belcher says you need to promote Lupoy. Okay, let's take a couple more comments. People will not stop talking about the kicker, so can we just get there for a minute? Who are some of the kicker prospects for Alabama, and why didn't they let Papanastos kick it from the right sideline? Says Ashley Waite. She's dying to know.
Yeah, This has definitely been a very popular question this recruiting cycle. Once again, Alabama is not recruiting a kicker in the 2018 class. Alabama signed a kicker in the 2017 class in Joseph Bulovas. He redshirted this past year. Alabama doesn't recruit kickers every single year. No school recruits kickers every single year. They're going to see what Bulovas can do, and if he doesn't work out, maybe they look into a grad transfer or a walk-on who's currently on campus. But as far as extending a scholarship to a kicker, that's not happening this year. Alabama did sign a punter in this class in Skylar DeLong. Obviously J.K. Scott is gone. He graduated from the program, so DeLong is likely going to be the team's starting punter next season. But as far as a field goal kicker goes in the 2018 class, Alabama is not recruiting a field goal kicker.
All right, that's Chris Kirschner. I'm Hannah Chalker. Thanks so much for joining us on the Alabama Recruiting Show right here on SEC Country. If you're just joining us, we've had a packed show so far in the quick 20 minutes that we've been on, and a lot more to come, including an interview with Bobby Brown that we'll get to in just a minute that Chris Kirschner did earlier today. But now let's move on to Petit-Frere, Nicholas Petit-Frere, Tampa, Florida, 5-star offensive tackle, another important visitor to Tuscaloosa this weekend, not committed. What's his status?
Yeah, from talking to multiple people over these past few weeks and talking to people over the past few days, it seems like Alabama is the team to beat for Nicholas Petit-Frere, 5-star offensive tackle from Berkeley Prep down in Tampa, Florida. But the only thing with Petit-Frere is he still has visits to go in these next few weeks. He's going to be visiting Florida this upcoming weekend and Ohio State the weekend before signing day. From talking to people on Alabama's side of things, sources close to the program believe Ohio State is Alabama's biggest competition at this point. And with him visiting Ohio State just a few days before National Signing Day, that's obviously cause for concern. But Alabama has felt pretty good about where it stands with Petit-Frere for quite some time now. It was just always a matter of getting him back on campus. He didn't visit for any game this fall. So to get him back on campus for such a big recruiting weekend, which this past weekend was with the National Championship Parade in town, was definitely a big deal. He brought his mother along. Mother is a big part of his recruiting process. She's going to have a big say on where her son ends up going to college. The thing with Petit-Frere, very big into academics. One of the smartest kids I've talked to in this 2018 class. Academics are very important to him. And I specifically asked him down in Orlando for the Under Armour game earlier this month, did he feel like if he got a degree from Alabama, would that be satisfactory to him? And he said that Alabama's school is definitely up to par to his academic standards. So that's definitely something to keep in mind because academics are very important to him. He has over a 3.8 GPA. 5-star offensive tackle, so he definitely is not only going to be an important asset on the football field, in the locker room, in the classroom, so it's definitely something that Alabama looks for. And the one thing I can definitely say about Petit-Frere is that whichever school he winds up at is getting a very impressive player. I was in Orlando the entire week for the Under Armour game, and in my opinion, if Petit-Frere wasn't one of the top 3 overall players at the event, and we're talking some of the nation's top high school football players in the country, Petit-Frere was definitely in the top 5. He's that good of a player. He was dominating opposing defensive linemen. He actually went up against Jordan Davis a few reps. Jordan Davis signed with Alabama, and Petit-Frere was manhandling Jordan Davis, who's no slouch. He's 6'5", 240. So, and Petit-Frere was definitely putting in work on that practice field during the week of the Under Armour game. So Alabama feels good with where it stands. Right now, if I had to make a projection, I think Alabama ends up signing him as well.
Okay, well, if they get him, he'll be essential to protecting the quarterback, and let's talk about just that after Alabama missed out on guys like Justin Fields, Emory Jones, who went to Florida. Of course, Justin Fields committed to and signed with Georgia. Where does that leave Alabama? Well, you have the name Brock Purdy in here, 3-star quarterback. Where does he fit into all of this? And I'm surprised that no one has said anything in the comment section, but what are your thoughts on Hurts transferring, and will that open up another spot? I know a lot of people said Hurts to Texas. I don't think there's any shot in it happening. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the Jalen Hurts transfer stuff. I really don't see Jalen Hurts transferring at this time. For one, it's not a guarantee that, obviously Tua came in and won the game for Alabama, but it's not a guarantee that Tua is going to automatically be the starting quarterback. That's just not how Nick Saban operates. There's going to be a quarterback competition this spring, and then in fall camp, there's going to be another competition. There's going to be a lot of practices before we get to that first game against Louisville. So I just don't see Jalen Hurts transferring at this time. Alabama only has 3 scholarship quarterbacks. So yeah, I mean, maybe Jalen Hurts, if he loses out to Tua, which in my opinion I think is going to happen, if he loses the starting quarterback job to Tua, maybe Hurts decides to switch positions. Maybe he plays running back, maybe he plays wide receiver, because in my opinion I think that's where his NFL future lies. I don't think he's an NFL type of quarterback, and that's just my opinion. But I really don't think Hurts is going to transfer from the program. Now, as far as quarterbacks in the 2018 class go, Alabama definitely wants to sign a quarterback in this class. We talked a lot on this show about Emory Jones in the past. He ended up signing with Florida. So right now things are, Alabama definitely has its eyes on a couple of quarterbacks. Brock Purdy, the 3-star quarterback out of Arizona, and James Foster, a 4-star quarterback in-state from Montgomery. Right now, Brock Purdy is the team's top target at the position. He put up some ridiculous stats this season out in Arizona. He was named the Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Arizona. He had 57 passing touchdowns, 10 rushing touchdowns, over 1,000 yards on the ground, over 4,000 yards through the air. So I asked Purdy last week. I ended up talking to Purdy after he got an Alabama offer. He did have an offer before from the Crimson Tide, but it was a preferred walk-on. Alabama decided to offer him a full ride last week. So right after he got offered by Alabama, I asked him, with the stats that he put up, how does one go unnoticed the way he has? Because in these past few weeks and months, his recruitment has definitely taken off. Last season out in Arizona, he started off the season, his junior year, having mono, lost a lot of weight. He was very skinny, didn't really have the strength the entire year. So he regained his strength over the summer, and like I said, he put up some very incredible stats. So that's why Purdy's name has definitely been a hot name as far as quarterbacks go in the 2018 class, with teams looking to fill a last-minute spot at quarterback. Purdy has definitely emerged as the team's top target at the quarterback position. He's going to take an official visit to Alabama this weekend. He's coming off a trip to Iowa State this past weekend. He'll take a midweek visit to national champion UCF this upcoming, I think it's Wednesday. He's taking his visit to Orlando, where I'm sure they'll have a national championship parade waiting for him. But yeah, I think by the weekend's end, Purdy is going to be Alabama's quarterback. He told me that he wants to commit at whichever school he visits while he's on that visit. So he only has 2 more visits planned right now. That's UCF and Alabama. And the schools that Purdy is considering at this time, Boise State, Iowa State, UCF, and Alabama. I mean, there's really no comparison with where those programs are. So I do think that by Sunday, when Purdy finishes his official visit, that it would be no surprise to me to see him end up committing on that trip.
Could be a tough decision for Purdy between 2 national champs, so we'll have to get your update on that next Monday. Okay, that's Chris Kirshner. I'm Hannah Chalker. You guys, I'm kind of knock off a little bit of the dust here. It's been over a month. A little thing called a national championship happened in between since we've been back on talking about recruiting. So let's show you guys some of the commit lists. We'll get you all caught up on the names that we've been hearing about so much since we have been off air. This is the 2018 signees list. Chris, get us up to speed. And of course, these are in alphabetical order. Am I correct?
Yes, alphabetical order. One 5-star prospect right now, that's Iyabi Anoma. Another prospect who was down in Orlando for the Under Armour game. He was actually named the alpha dog of the event by 24/7 Sports. If you guys watched the Under Armour game on ESPN earlier this month, Anoma was insane. The performance he put on in that game was absolutely incredible. And to think that Anoma has only been playing football for 2 years, his ceiling is through the roof. I know the coaching staff was thrilled to get him on board. And then you have guys like Jalen Armour-Davis, a guy who I feel like can definitely compete for a job in the secondary this season. He's not going to early enroll. He's going to enroll in the summer, but he's definitely talented enough to play early. Christian Barmore, 4-star defensive tackle from Philadelphia. He signed with Alabama during the early signing period. Another big win for Alabama to get Barmore on board, because defensive line is definitely something that Alabama has stressed this year, and it's a down year for defensive line across the board. And Barmore is a guy that definitely emerged late in the process. To get him on board is definitely a big win for Alabama.
Somebody not on the signee list, but we are going to be hearing from very shortly. That's 4-star defensive tackle Bobby Brown. We will see his name on the potential prospect list. 6'4", 282 pounds, plays for Lamar High School. This is a guy that Alabama wants to get.
Yeah, definitely. Brown committed to Alabama back in December. He decommitted from Texas A&M. And it was for several months, it seemed like Alabama was going to land Bobby Brown. It was just a matter of when he wanted to make his decision. So Brown decided, right before he took an official visit to Texas A&M, he decided to push up his commitment date. I believe it was back in November. And that definitely caught Alabama off guard, because he was planning on making a decision after that Texas A&M trip. He decided to push it up right before he visited Texas A&M. He decides to commit to the Aggies, decommits after Kevin Sumlin was fired, and there was still some uncertainty on who Jimbo Fisher was going to retain on the staff. So, it turns out that Jimbo Fisher did end up retaining Terry Price, who Brown is very close to. So, while he is committed to Alabama, he told me in an interview you'll hear in full tomorrow on SECcountry.com and in a story on SECcountry.com tomorrow morning. Texas A&M is really the only school he's still considering at this point, but in my opinion, after talking to him, I really don't think Bobby Brown is going to end up flipping from Alabama. He was in Tuscaloosa this past weekend for the championship parade, was blown away by the festivities. So I think Alabama really doesn't have much to worry about.
Okay, between the Tide and Aggies for Bobby Brown, but let's hear why he thinks Alabama is all for him.
The thing that I can say that I think Alabama is the right school for me is, like, I know I'm going to go there and I'm going to be doing just the best of the best every day. And I know myself as I like competition. Competing every day is what I like. That's why I play sports. I played so many sports throughout my life. Mm-hmm. 1. 2 is I know that Coach Saban is going to lay out a foundation, and I'll be able to put my brick in that foundation and be able to have my name on greatness as with all my other future teammates.
Like Chris said, you can hear the full interview tomorrow on SEC Country, but he said he wants competition, and Alabama is the place to be.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other place in the country like it. Bobby Brown told me, if you want to get to the NFL, if you want to be one of those best players, he mentioned that, a lot of kids his age look up to guys like J.J. Watt, Von Miller. Brown wants to be that guy in a few years that says, I want to be the next Bobby Brown. So he feels like Alabama can get him to that level under the guidance of Nick Saban and defensive line coach Carl Dunbar. So, like I said, I really don't expect Bobby Brown to, flip to Texas A&M. I think he's 100% locked in with the Crimson Tide, even though he is still listening to Texas A&M.
We're getting a ton of more questions about the field goal kicker. If you guys are just joining us, rewind it back once we get off live, and Chris mentioned a few names for who could replace Papanastos for a field goal kicker. But I'm going to combine, we're running out of time here, so I'm going to combine all of these questions into one question for you. And the most I'm seeing is people are asking about the offensive line and running backs. So quick thoughts on that.
Yeah, Alabama has signed Tommy Brown and Emil Ekiyor already in this 2018 class. Brown, a 4-star offensive tackle out of California, and Ekiyor, a center out of Indianapolis. Alabama is still recruiting Nicholas Petit-Frere in this class, who just visited this past weekend, who we just talked about earlier in the show. I expect Alabama to land him. And then you have a guy like Penei Sewell out of Utah. I think his commitment will come down to either Alabama or Oregon. At this time, I think Oregon's going to land him, and I think Alabama ends up getting Petit-Frere. And as far as running backs go, Alabama signed one in this class already, in Jerome Ford, a 3-star prospect out of Armwood High School down in Florida. He's the only running back that Alabama is going to sign in this class.
All right, we're out of time for more questions and comments, but you can bring them back to next Monday's show. We'll be right back here for the Alabama Recruiting Show next Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central Time. But until then, only a few weeks away from National Signing Day, Wednesday, February 7th. Where can people find all of that coverage?
Yeah, make sure you guys go to seccountry.com. All of our coverage on recruiting across the SEC, not only just Alabama, will be there.
And quick things for our viewers to watch out for this weekend. Who's going to be in Tuscaloosa again?
Brock Purdy, 3-star quarterback. Jacob Copeland, 4-star wide receiver. Isaac Taylor Stewart, 5-star cornerback, is also expected in town. So it's going to be another important weekend for the Crimson Tide. Okay, so next Monday we'll have the update for you on all of that as well. All right, that's Chris Kirshner. I'm Hannah Chalker. Guys, we'll see you next Monday. Until then, head on over to SEC Country, the Alabama page, and follow us on social media for all of the latest recruiting updates out of Tuscaloosa. Thanks for watching the Alabama Recruiting Show. We'll see you next week.